Great, great, great. So, well, thanks for being here today, by the way. And for those watching the recording, this is Lorna and Paul and Fran, and we're gonna be chatting here today about stupid things, as always, like, you know. and now, I mean, just kidding. We're gonna be going through the agenda, and the agenda contains roughly, as always, questions and answers, and generating HTML, the HTML template from the React component to remove duplicates, and also natively support envelopes like cloud events and similar, right? So yeah, I have to ask, any of you want to raise some question before we jump into the topics? Or
no, I'm just here to lurk.
Okay.
I was going to say, could we do the cloud events one first? Because I'm going to have dinner with the family at some point. Otherwise, they'd stop talking to me.
Okay, let's do it. Let's switch. Cool. So let me. Okay, let me share my screen just to expose what I'm talking about when I mean the native support for envelopes. You can see my screen, right? I always ask this and I always get yes. Is it?
Yep, we can see it.
I'm still waiting for the first day. I have no. Let me just. I'm sorry if I'm a little bit slow, but it's morning here, so and it's Spain, so it's really early for me in the day. You know, 10 a.m. for me, it's really early, given that I go to bed at 2 a.m., 3 a.m. so yeah.
No, but you have a siesta, so that doesn't count, right?
You sometimes have siesta. I wish every day. So yeah. Cool. So I was so what I'm talking about here. Just let's start by the example because I think it's going to be easier to understand. So in a little bit with a little bit of context, what happens here is some people, many people actually, are using Kafka with Avro, and well, you can see the setup of Java, Kafka, Avro, or Java, or any Java language, JVM language. Anyway, Kafka and Avro seems to be a good combination, or a common combination at least. And more and more I'm seeing the use of Kafka, Avro, and cloud events, or people want to start using cloud events with Avro. It makes sense. It makes total sense. Like for those who don't know what cloud events is, let's summarize it. Like in short, really short, is an envelope. So an envelope is this kind of message that actually wraps another message, like an envelope, right? So, and then you send your messages wrapped with this format, with this message. Cool. So what happens here is AsyncAPI allows you to define that, or to signal that you're using Avro. That's fine. But then people are using cloud events, which is probably not defined with Avro. It's defined with JSON schema or any other language, right? And what happens is that there needs to be a way for people to signal their that they want to use the content of the message. The content that you are actually interested in is Avro, is defined with Avro, but the envelope, it's probably defined with something else. Like in this case, it's going to be cloud events, and can be defined with JSON schema, with Avro itself, or with any other schema language, right? Thing is, That's one thing. That's one side of the equation, let's say. The other side is many people, what they do is they define their messages already containing the information of cloud events, all the fields that cloud events provide you. So that means that on every message, you have to be defining the same fields over and over, because yeah, that's the only way you have, for instance, to have Kafka validate this for you, right? So Kafka automatically allows you to validate fields, the messages, if you define them with Avro. And that's mainly the only way to do it. The problem is again that you define some fields from the cloud events envelope over and over on every message on your schema registry, for instance, which is also pretty common to have Kafka cloud events and schema registry. So on your schema registry, you define on every message the cloud event envelope. And that's not, I mean, that's doable, of course, but it's far from ideal, because tomorrow you want to change the version of the cloud events envelope or any other field, and you have to go one by one on the schema registry, replacing all of them, because your message actually contains some extra information that shouldn't be there. It's not your business information. It's actually, don't know how to call it, but it's probably it's tools information if you want. So it's not really your business information. So yeah, so I was wondering if there could be a better way to do this, that we can signal from AsyncAPI that this is your message, it's Avro, and if you're using a code generator or documentation generator, you have to be aware that this is going to be grabbed with the cloud events envelope, and this is how the cloud events envelope looks like, right? And these are the fields that you can expect, and all the rules that you can apply using JSON schema or any other schema language. So yeah, so for instance, here I have an example of a test channel with a message, which schema format is, like I said, it's Avro. So we jump from here to here, and you see that the payload is, oh, you see, this is an example, a really vague example that whatever, like any Avro stuff here, whatever you want to put here. And that's fine. The thing is that, yeah, your information will be grabbed with the cloud events envelope. So I was playing with something like this. Please don't take into account the format, because this is, don't know, maybe it's usable like it is, but we have to give it a thought. This is just an example. And I was playing with something like this, like saying that the envelope of the message of the payload actually is of the format cloud events, and the schema that, for instance, if you say that it's cloud events, we already know the schema of cloud events. We don't need to define the schema, right? But you might want to still enforce additional rules to the schema. Like, for instance, I'm saying here, like the spec version, which is a field of cloud events, needs to be 1.0 or 1.1. 1.1 doesn't exist yet, but as an example. Again, we might want to enforce that people have to use either 1.0 or 1.1. Or that we want to define any other custom fields that are not defined on cloud events, and this is also possible. So we want to, on the envelope, we want to have some extra information, some custom fields. And of course, you can use JSON schema to define the rules that should apply to this information. Does it make sense? Or am I talking too much?
No, it makes sense to me. So I've seen a lot of interest in cloud events from the customers I work with, because traditionally they've done this, in a bespoke way. Everyone's done it differently. Everyone needs, some kind of tracing information or source and target, and we put it in the headers and we reinvent the wheel every time we do this integration. So given that cloud events is meant to be lightweight, as you know, I see a lot of customers actually lean in and say, okay, let's use this standard, because hopefully there'll be more and more tools that support it as we go on. So yeah, for me, it makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm. Also, let me just clarify that we already have a mechanism for this, which is the headers. So headers on the message are not meant to be the protocol headers, like in the case of MQTT, it's quality of service. In the case of HTTP, it can be content type. It's not meant to be this kind of headers, but it's meant to be metadata or headers for your application logic, business logic, right? So some people were saying like, yeah, I want to add extra information to my messages, like meta information to my messages. So I was saying that if it's meta information about your message, you should probably put it on the headers, right? Not on the payload. But yeah, that's not always possible. Like depending on the protocol, like WebSockets, for instance, you lack headers, so you have to put everything on the payload. And yeah, so that's just an example of why I'm trying to accommodate this type of metadata, if you want, in the form of envelope, right? Also because it's pretty common, like you said, like more and more people are interested in cloud events. Anyway,
sorry, I was going to say just one point on that note. So my understanding of cloud events is it depends on the protocol as to how it's supported. So HTTP would be different from Kafka or whatever, right? So you can have that structured or binary, I think they're called, is the two different types. So how, using this example, would you specify that? Because as you say, maybe it shouldn't live in an extension, which would seem the natural point if it's different for protocol. Do you see what I mean? Or maybe I've got the wrong point.
But you mean from the cloud events perspective, you mean?
Yeah, so for the cloud events to be compliant, for HTTP, you have to support both in the headers and in the message. But for Kafka, maybe it's completely different. So
it is actually that they have it defined themselves. So
yeah, so how would we model that in async is the question?
So it really depends. Let me find it. There's this thing about protocol bindings on cloud events, which is confusing because it's same name as that we have on AsyncAPI, but different concept. So yeah. So for instance, one of the things they suggest is that if you're gonna use Kafka with cloud events, you can do it in two ways. You put it on the headers, so all the cloud events fields are on the headers. You can see my screen, right? I'm on the Okay. I thought that was on the other tab or something. So this could be on the headers, and in this case, you can go to AsyncAPI and define the headers of the message like this to contain this, right? This information. And in the case of you want to have this information on the payload, like in this case, that's where this envelope information applies, right? Like I want to have an envelope on the payload. This envelope proposal that I'm doing, that's what it applies. Like in the case of you want to have cloud events with Kafka and using it on the payload, that's an envelope, right? And in the case you want to have cloud events with Kafka and put the fields on the headers, that's not an envelope. That's headers. That's meta information that go into the headers, right? Is this what you're asking for, or?
It is. It was more that. Are you proposing that it's only supported for Kafka or supported for all of the protocols that Cloud Events supports?
All of the protocols that even those that Cloud Events didn't think of, like it will be generic enough. Like for instance, in this case, I'm meaning Kafka, but it don't know if. Let me check. I'm sure they have WebSockets, but anyway, in any case, if Cloud Events doesn't have any bindings for WebSockets or for any other protocol, what's clear is that this information should either be on the whatever this protocol call headers, if they have, or it will be on the payload, right? Which for sure they will have. So that's why I'm trying to take this like very agnostic of Cloud Events, if you want. And this envelope is actually an envelope of the payload, right?
Yeah.
Independently of this being Cloud Events or not. That's why I'm signaling here that this is Cloud Events, but it can be, this is an optional field, as I say here, can be optional, right? And you remove format and just specify schema, and this can be your in-house envelope format that you build, right? You just have to define the schema that should be applied to validate this in-house envelope format that you created. But that's only for the payload, right? It's not for the headers. You know what I mean?
Yep. No, I got you. It was more, I guess, needing to ensure that it's aligned to the Cloud Event standard, in that they say that in some instances you have to support both headers and but you know, and envelope, but of course that's just a validation issue rather than anything major.
So you mean, for instance, that we could be changing probably this somehow, and
yeah, because if you look at, say, if we take HTTP as an example, they say that you have to support headers, envelope, and it can be both on the same message. That's valid. So, you know, if you want to duplicate data, that's a valid Cloud Event message, which of course is kind of a special case because you're going to get other protocols which aren't going to have headers, and as you know, so.
Mm-hmm. So having a way, like for instance, having Cloud Events information or telling on AsyncAPI that the Cloud Events information should go into headers or should go into payload and how to validate it.
Yeah, yeah,
that will be interesting. Because, yeah, thing is that in the case of headers, this is going to be an overlap with headers, right? With the headers field on AsyncAPI. So, yeah. And that will be like a merge between this schema and the header schema. And merging schemas is a known source of problems. Like this has been discussed for many years on the JSON schema community, that merging two schemas is not possible, let's say. Like you cannot guarantee that. Thing is that JSON schema is not a type definition language, is like, not sure if that was the word, but if it's an assertion language, something like this, or constraint definition language. So it doesn't mean that you're defining the type of information. You are just defining constraints that should apply to this information. And therefore you can, if you try to merge, you can end up with contradictory information, contradictory constraints. So if we try to merge this with the headers, this information with the headers, that will be a problem, right?
Yeah, no, understood. And just, sorry, I'm going to have to drop off in a minute, but just one other thing that's going to be interesting is, of course, Cloud Events also supports extensions.
Yeah, which is this kind.
Yeah, and I mean, there's some good stuff in there which really applies to async as well, I think. You know, like in the IoT world, where they actually allow, you know, just give me the summary out of all the events, and I expect I lose some, and, you know, say this is event out of 100, but I'm not sending you the other 100, that kind of thing. And also ordering, of course, which is a big thing for me. It's like, how do you order? They've got some support in there as well, which may make future thinking around what should be done in AsyncAPI easier if it can leverage what they're doing in Cloud Events. I don't know.
So yeah, I mean, I guess that's something you can do here. So this my custom field on the Cloud Events schema is actually these extensions, right? This is what you mean, I think. Unless I'm missing something new, maybe. It's been a long time I don't look at the spec, at the Cloud Event spec. But
yeah, you know, I've been a while since I reviewed the extensions, but I will. I'll review them and respond on the GitHub thread.
okay.
Maybe.
Yeah, that will be useful because these extensions are not like the OpenAPI and AsyncAPI extensions, right? Are not this one starting with X dash whatever, right? It can be any name, right?
Yeah, I believe they can. There, hang on. I was just going to have a quick look.
Yeah.
Well, they're optional, which is good. Let's look at a sample.
Actually, now that you're saying, I think they will probably they were suggesting to use not the X dash pattern, but the these Java packages like syntax like com dot company dot whatever.
Yeah, no, they've got simple names, so I don't know.
Okay.
I'll have a look, but I'm not sure how they're getting approved because they've got very simple names, like data ref is so that you can not send the actual payload. Of course, you just have a URI reference to it and say, go look here. Yeah. All right, I'm going to have to run, but it's great to see you guys.
Thanks, Paul.
And
so have a nice dinner and
thanks.
an evening.
And I hope you have some coffee and get some energy for the day.
Thanks, man.
Yeah.
Enjoy.
Bye.
Bye. So yes, next thing. I hope you don't get bored, Lorna.
I hope that I'm kind of taking some of it in.
Sorry?
I hope that I'm understanding some of it. I hope that I'm learning some stuff along the way. I'm not actively using AsyncAPI, so it's kind of hard to. Hard to get into the detail, but it's really good to hear what's happening in the project. Okay.
Feel free to ask any questions. Happy to answer any questions here. Just quickly, because this can be useful once you are generating documentation with AsyncAPI. So far we have the generator package, the generator tool, if you want, that allows you to generate code and documentation. And one of the templates, that's how we call this systems that allows you to generate code, documentation in HTML, documentation in Markdown. So we have one template which is called HTML template. We are very creative with the names. And yes, so there's this HTML template for the generator that allows you to generate HTML documentation. But we also have a React component, which is completely separate. And they both serve the same purpose in the end, like displaying documentation in HTML for the end user. And one is using React and the other one is using generator. And we were thinking that we should probably remove duplicate work here and somehow reusing one to generate the other, right? So we don't work twice on the same thing, right? Because right now that React component is like months before, right? Months behind the HTML template right now, and of course that's not good. So instead of doubling the work here, one of the things that we thought is so React allows you to do something really cool, which is rendering on the server, not only on the browser, and generating static markup. So why not do we take the React component, generate the statically on the server on Node.js side, the markup, and then we take this markup, and it will be the output will be written into a file, and all of this done using the generator tool. So we don't have to maintain the HTML template and the React component. Actually, the HTML template will be using the React component as a source of information for the HTML. So yeah, I don't want to bore you and people watching the recording, but here's more information about how we could possibly do it using the render string and React DOM hydrate and all this stuff. And yeah, the idea is to remove duplicate work right now. So we don't have many resources. Sorry, I should not be saying resources. We don't have many people working full time on the project. So yeah, doubling the work doesn't seem smart, right? So repeating the same work doesn't seem smart. So
I have questions.
Yeah.
I think the documentation component is the only part of AsyncAPI I really have used in Anger. And I can think of lots of reasons why I would want an HTML rendering, but not in the browser particularly. Are the two outputs equivalent? Like, do I need some JavaScript dependencies to make it work, or can I just get HTML that is just HTML and just is rendered information?
So that's so the HTML template is, you don't need any JavaScript dependency. It's just HTML and that's it. You get the final rendered version, right? Cool. And React component is, you need React, which you need JavaScript, right? So that's my point here. Like on the generator, so the generator has a cool mechanism which is called hooks, right? And after we have some hooks, like one of them is after the generation finished, do some stuff. You can do some stuff. You can run some functions. One of the things that we can do is on the HTML template, after it finished generating, which is, it's gonna generate nothing, right? This is a little bit confusing to explain, but we create an HTML template which is actually empty, right? And on the after process, we actually generate the markup and write it into a file from the React component, like taking the React component as a source of information. So that will allow you to have the React component for the browser, and the HTML template, which will be generating pure HTML without any JavaScript dependency. That's something as well. So there are other. This is the one that I like the most. This first option, which is the one that you don't require any JavaScript dependency, and you just get the plain markup on HTML and CSS, and maybe some JavaScript for clicking interaction, but that's it. Can be also embedded on the HTML, so you don't get any extra request. So
yeah, just the browser is not the place I normally use my HTML output. Like, I work quite a lot with documentation, so I would want to embed it somewhere else, or convert it to somewhere else, or restart it somewhere else. I don't want a picture of a rich single page app that does things. I don't want that. I just want markup. Okay, so that's that would be super cool. Super cool feedback as well. Yeah. Okay, so yeah, you just would like to have the markup without even the CSS or anything, just the markup. I don't mind, because I can obviously like replace the CSS and stuff. I just need to be able to get like, and probably I can tell the generator, hey, here's my CSS, or at least here's some hints on my favorite colors. You know, like I need this, that. I do want the nav. I don't know what you have. I've used a bunch of the other documentation tools in the open API space, and I expect it to be along the same lines. But the browser is often not the destination. And also, I'm a disabled user, so if it's funky, probably can't interact with it. If it's HTML, got tools for that. Okay, perfect. So yeah, so and the other option is actually that you were saying, or you were worried about, which is we generate minimum HTML, like just a div, and then you load the whole content from JavaScript, which is not, in my opinion, it's not ideal, because that the browser is going to understand it, but you load it, and when you look at the source code, you will see nothing. You will see just a div. That's not really good, in my opinion. I think if we can generate the markup, and optionally ways to enable, disable the CSS generation and JavaScript for the interactions, and enable or customize the CSS, or customize some stuff, I think that will be better. And now that actually resembles, reminds me, not resembles, it's too early for me. Where is it? I think it's on the generator. So there is another issue here on the generator tool on the considering React as a template engine. Right now we're using Nunjax. Don't know if you know Nunjax, but it's you know handlebars. So it's kind of a handle, like on the same kind of handlebars as a template engine, but it's similar to Jinja 2 from Python. So it's called Nunjax, but Nunjax can get really difficult to read sometimes. And I'll show you an example. So when you're generating code, for instance, sorry, I don't know, this thing, for instance, this is generating a Java class. This, I don't know how to read this. So to me, this is super hard to read, right? And we should have a better way to do this kind of thing. And that's why I was considering adding React as a different template engine, if you want, like for instance, Ink uses React for CLI tools, to create CLI tools, or React Native uses React to create mobile apps, for instance, right? So React is not just for the web, it's just a convention, or it's just a spec around
views on how to define views, actually JSX, not just React. And this from there, we can actually output whatever we want. In our case, it could be outputting files, right? Like outputting code or outputting documentation. And you were saying, like, for instance, we're trying to generate the whole website for the documentation, but you might be only interested in just one part of it, like, I don't know, a table where the schema is defined with the information, or just a part of it, right? So if we use React, it's going to be easier to modularize these parts of the page. So you can actually tell the generator, I just want this specific component where the schema has the information defined, or where the servers are listed, or where the description of the whole API is rendered. So yeah, so this is something that we should take into account as well. And also we'll get better errors, because right now when you get an error on Nginx, it's sometimes almost impossible to debug it, or hard to debug it, because of the very nature of Nginx. So yeah. Cool. Let me, where is it? I think. So is there anything else you want to know?
No, this has been interesting.
Thanks for that. Thanks for joining the call today. And also Paul, who will be probably watching the recording afterwards. And yeah, thanks for joining the project from time to time. This is really good to see familiar faces from the API community to come to AsyncAPI as well. And I love it.
Yeah, I have a real interest in the distributed systems, and I'm not using it at work, which means that I'm not really active in the AsyncAPI projects, but I think I'm super interested. I've done a lot with message queues, and we run a lot of MQTT stuff in the house, and I don't describe that, but I'd like to. And also I think to be active in OpenAPI, it really helps to have an understanding of the sister standards and how doing one could benefit another. So I think there's lots of good ideas going across the two. So yeah, it's always interesting to dip into the project. This came up on my calendar this morning, and no, it's the first day back at work after a bank holiday. No one else had booked time in my calendar, so that's good.
Yay, we are the first ones. Cool, Lorna. So thanks for joining, and yeah, see you soon around.
API Specifications Conference, maybe?
Oh yeah, it's very, very soon. Yeah, like next week maybe, or something like that.
Next week? I've already recorded the talks, so don't teach me anything new now. All right, take care.
Cool, take care. Bye.